Yeah.
Where's our fire?
It's just a monitor side chat. Yeah, because if we're doing the wrong thing, you got to tell us, because you haven't been either, right?
What?
You haven't been to a fireside
I
chat
haven't
here.
been to a fireside chat. I'm still a little confused about the concept.
Yeah, well.
Is there a fire going to come on?
Well, if there is, we'll probably abandon the chat.
A virtual fire?
It sounds like a Donald Trump show. You're fired. Okay. My understanding, what we're going to do here, as far as I'm concerned, but Mary can alter this, is I will grill her with a few softball questions for the first 15 minutes. I hope she will give expansive answers, because I have rather few questions. And then we'll give you the opportunity to ask her the questions you know that she's deliberately avoiding answering. Okay? So that's it. This is Mary Roach, and I'm Seth Shostak, by the way, but you may know that. So Mary, let me just review just very briefly the books that you've written that everybody should know about. I know it's Stiff and
Yes.
Bonk and Packing for Mars, and there's one more about...
Spook.
Is that the one about life after death?
The subtitle was Science Tackles the Afterlife. So it was essentially the fun and strange world of university-based paranormal research.
Okay. How's the audio? Can you hear well enough or not?
Are we good? Can everybody hear?
I mean, it's a stupid question to ask, because if you can, of course, you won't answer the question. No. All right. Well, Mary, in 2010, you were on Jon Stewart, and everybody wants to know about what it's like to be on Jon Stewart. Now, you spent a lot of time talking about NASA's waste management technology, an interesting euphemism. And it was very easy for Stewart to make fun of this, to make jokes. Everyone loves scatological humor. Jon Stewart particularly likes scatological humor. But when I watched that clip, and you can find this on YouTube, of course,
Yes.
it seemed to me that you were slightly embarrassed by the topic, and given that you'd written a book about it.
Oh no, I wasn't embarrassed. I was not embarrassed at all by the topic. I might have been a little unnerved by being on the Daily Show, but no, the topic to me was I'm absolutely fine being referred to as the woman who wrote about pooping in space. Although it's one chapter of the book, basically, people will come up to me and say, "You're that woman who wrote a book about crapping in space," because of the one chapter. And I have to say, it is the definitive crapping in space chapter. I outdid myself. I even got to I found a paper by these guys at NASA Ames, these engineers who'd come up with a very high fidelity human fecal simulant so that they could test the toilets on the zero gravity plane, because if you can imagine, it's very difficult in 20 seconds of going over, being like, go, that sort of thing. It didn't work. This poor guy. I talked to somebody who actually was on that flight, Charles Borland, the food guy at NASA, was on a flight while they were testing one of the toilets, and they had to have a guy try to use it. So anyway, for that reason.
More prunes.
More prunes, exactly. The guy should have been dosed up with prunes. But that would have thrown off the rheological properties. So you don't want it. You don't want anything runny. So I just threw myself into the topic, and just the level of detail, of just the amount of planning, to me, some of the stuff that goes on Earth, planning for life without gravity is as or more interesting as what goes on in orbit. I just found it utterly fascinating. So I had actually lost any kind of embarrassment. I'm such a geek. I was so fascinated by, well, what are you going to, you have to completely rethink, because a toilet, it's water and gravity you need for that thing to work. And so now you've got to completely rethink it. It's airflow. You're like sitting on a shop vac.
How do you know it is?
What?
How do you know it's like sitting on a shop?
So I am told. Yeah. I didn't actually, yeah. But I did try out the positional training.
Well, I mean, look, one of the many charms of your book.
You get me going, see?
That's the whole idea here. Okay. Well, one of the many charms of your books, Mary, is that you take on the nitty-gritty of your subjects, right? I mean, I'm sure that if you talk to the astronauts, and you've all talked to astronauts, the two questions they get all the time is, has there been sex in space, or what's it like if they think there has? And secondly, how do you go to the bathroom in space? So you take on these things. So you kind of dare to go where no hominid has gone before. And in particular, that includes when you were doing the research for Bonk. I remember the chapter where you persuaded your husband to visit a lab to have sex in front of an X-ray machine.
Yeah.
Now, I just sort of wonder, what does your husband think of your career choice?
Well, first of all, it was ultrasound, which is what people frequently think it's an MRI, that we had sex in an MRI tube, and that would be okay because you have some privacy. You're in the tube, that's fine. Ultrasound, if you've ever had ultrasound, that's the one where the guy is right there with his wand. So it's a deeply awkward situation, and I am the kind of person, I just have to say, if you want to have an interesting life, you should always just say yes to things without even giving the barest minimum of thought as to how awkward and awful it's going to be. And by the time you realize how awkward and awful it's going to be, it's too late. The plane tickets are bought. The guy is waiting for you. And so that's how my life goes. And every now and then I drag, Ed into it. And Ed, when I first started working on Bonk, which is a book about people bringing sexual physiology into a laboratory setting, somebody's got to study it. What did I explode just now?
That was the fire.
I would say a tempting sound effect given the subject.
Anyway, Ed foolishly had said, sex research, sign me up if you need a volunteer. So, remembering that he had said that, those many months ago, I said, you know how, you said you haven't been to Europe in 25 years, and would you like to go? And we'll go see, go to the West End, we'll go to London, see some plays, maybe we'll drive over to Stonehenge, it'll be great. We have to have sex in front of a guy in a white coat. My husband also has a very large capacity for denial, so he just put it out of his head, and we had a great time until like half an hour before we were due to go into Dr. Deng's lab, and then we're sitting in these chairs outside the X-ray and ultrasound department, and Dr. Deng comes down the hallway, and Ed goes, "Oh God, here he comes." But up until that moment, he was fine with it, and it was an awkward.
I'm surprised he hasn't learned to be cherry now.
To be
cautious about your
To
suggestions.
be cautious, yes. He probably is. I've really sort of left him alone since that one. I felt kind of bad because the burden was, of course, on him. It was a study. It was they were doing a 4-dimensional ultrasound movie, and they were sort of testing this diagnostic method whereby you could make a film, say, of lips puckering or a penis erecting, and that one had been done. The researcher had done his own penis, and now he's like, well, now I want to do 2 people having sex. And I had said, I'd like to, when you do that historic thing, I'd like to be there. And he had said, well, we don't have any volunteers, so if your organization could provide a brave volunteer, a couple. So my organization had to call its husband.
Your books have been about, all right, so they've been about death, they've been about sex, the funky side of space travel, life after death. Just somewhat curious whether your interest in these kind of earthy, animalistic subjects has anything to do with the fact that in the past you wrote press releases for the San Francisco Zoological Society.
I think that I think you have to go back farther than that, because people have asked me often, like, what is wrong with you? Why do you? Because I find all these things fascinating. The zoo to me was, I got to work. It was my first job really out of college, and I got to work in a trailer by Gorilla World, which to me was just as fabulous as it got in terms of having to go to a place of employment, sign in, and do your job. To be at the zoo, listening to the Siamangs hooting and the various. To me it was a great alternative to a cubicle. But I try to. People say, "Well, were you a weird kid?" And I used to say, "No. I had a very normal childhood." But then every now and then things occur to me. Like I have a memory as a child. I didn't like dolls very much. I liked little dinosaurs. And one day Mary Hewitt, I remember her name, she gave me a Barbie doll, and what I did with that Barbie doll is I would pull its head off, and then I would give myself 30 seconds to get the head back on, or she'd die. And then, you know, fast forward to when I was working on Stiff, and I did this chapter about, they did research in Paris after the guillotine. The guillotine had been brought in as a humane alternative. It should be instantaneous, but there were reports that for a few seconds the head, you know, there's still blood in the head, and the head, people knew what their situation was for a couple of months. So you would have a few seconds to put that head back on, and if you could reattach everything, so it was really, in a way, kind of, you know, it all goes back to, I guess I'm just wired oddly. I don't know.
Kind of interesting, convoluted connection there between the French Revolution, Barbie, and subject matter. What do you enjoy more, writing the books or doing the research?
I enjoy both of those, but the synergy between them, like when I'm, for example, what you brought up, the ultrasound scenario, that one, although it was awkward, there was, first of all, I'm taking notes the entire time. And although it was an awkward thing and I couldn't wait for it to be over, part of me was going, this is going to be so much fun to write. But because it is so awkward and so unusual, and so, I you know, couldn't wait to write that up, because the writing, so the reporting is interesting and fun, but partly it's the knowledge that you've found something that's going to be so fun to write. When the reporting is just kind of so-so and not that interesting, then the writing is equally not that fun, so they depend on each other.
Did the doctor get a publishable paper out of your experience with him?
I don't think he published. He published the puckering lips and Lancet. The man was published in Lancet. And I believe the erecting penis one even made it into print for some. I think that he didn't. The capture, because when you see that footage, and it's on the web. I put it there. And it is the most G-rated, X-rated footage you will ever see. It's you know what a sonogram looks like. It's very grainy, and it's about 2 seconds, but it isn't that nice 3D like the other stuff. It didn't work very well, is the answer. So I think that he didn't publish it because the technology didn't quite work how we thought it
So
would.
he didn't really learn anything new then?
He didn't really learn anything new, and I was excited about actually being in a published journal paper. I thought that would be pretty nifty.
Well, yeah, you should ask to be a co-author.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I'll just ask one more question. I think you must have had some pretty interesting stories from book tours, given the subject matter of your work. Can you recall anything that particularly amused you during a book tour?
During a book tour, well, here's something. There's something I've dubbed last guy syndrome, and that is when you're signing books and there's a long line of people. There's almost invariably a very odd person at the back of the line who has positioned him or her, more often him, but sometimes her, at the back of the line so as to have to be able to talk to you for a very long time without holding up the rest of the line. And one guy once brought a Scrabble set, wanted to play Scrabble, but they're very they're unusual individuals, and the bookstore people have by that point often sort of left, and you're there with the last guy. So that's always an interesting aspect of book tour. A book tour is I'm trying to think of it's not that fascinating, the stuff that goes on book tour. It's a lot of with Stiff. Frequently the publicist will book the local Fox affiliate morning local news show, which starts at 7 in the morning. So you have to get on a plane at 3:30 in the morning to get there for this little segment, and which why did they do this to you? So you get there and you haven't slept very much, and I'm not, as you can tell, good with makeup, and so I'm all bedraggled and I look like hell, and then I get there and there's these very perky people with a lot of makeup, and they go, oh yes, right, you're the author, okay, and always I'm coming on between the person from the local animal shelter with the bunny and the gardening guy or woman, and so the host will say, okay, and thank you, the bunny person leaves, and then they'll go, and now we have, and they're reading the cue card, Mary Roach to talk about cadavers, and it's people are eating their breakfast, and they're like, wait, it was a bunny, and now it's a cadavers, and it was, so Stiff was an unusual book to be on tour with. Stiff was, well, that was my first book. People are like, who is this woman? She's written a book about dead people. It's kind of a funny book about dead people, and here she is. And so that was interesting.
All right, it's 1:15, so here's your chance. I don't know if there's a microphone for the people in the audience, but you can, okay, but I don't, just shout it out.
You can come up and talk into my...
Yeah, there's some
chest.
chance that the video cameras will pick it up. I don't know if this will be as popular on YouTube as some of the other things that are there, but anybody, we're blinded by the light, so you have to just stand up and shout.
So what's your next book on?
Oh, okay, well, I'll give you the title. I won't go into much detail, but the title of my next book is Gulp, G-U-L-P, and the subtitle is Adventures on the Alimentary Canal. So you can only imagine where I'm going.
Food for thought.
And that comes out, it'll be out in April, and now...
April.
Next April, yeah, coming April.
So based on all your research on what it takes to take humans into space, I'm sure you're familiar with the debate unmanned man.
Yes.
Is it worth it?
You mean for a Mars mission?
Yeah.
Well, it depends on what you mean by worth it. Worth it in terms of the science that we get, worth it in terms of getting people excited about supporting space travel. I think in the latter, yeah. I'm envisioning, I'm kind of a Pollyanna. I have this dream that like the government space agencies can work with Elon Musk and the private folks, and and everybody can pull together, and it'll be this wonderful global thing where we're all on the same page and we're all really excited, and the tax, not one nation's taxpayers won't have to foot the bill, which would be phenomenally huge, and in terms of the science, hard to justify. So I don't know if I answered that question.
Yeah, so I was just general.
Yeah, I am a bit of a Pollyanna. I would love to see it happen in my lifetime. And there's an interesting there's a group in the Netherlands. It's a group of aerospace engineers who are trying to sell global media rights in order to try to fund one way is the wrong, an emigration to Mars. In other words, people would go and stay the rest of their lives, and they would be supplied, and because the hard part of Mars is coming back. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, there's a lot to consider there, but it's an interesting thing to discuss, debate. I don't know, and I'm kind of jazzed about it. And Elon Musk saying we're going to, his timeline seems a little overambitious, but wanting to say that, yeah, I'd like to, with NASA or without them, we're putting people on Mars. So, but your answer will be far more interesting on that.
No, I'm not here to answer that. Although I will ask a question that's somewhat orthogonal, because there have been at least 2 editorials, or op-ed pieces, I should say, op-ed pieces in the New York Times over the past 4 or 5 years about the suggestion that the thing to do about Mars is indeed just to make it a one-way trip, and you just go.
Lawrence Krauss wrote one, I think.
Yes, and before him, Paul Davies.
Yeah.
So my question is, how many of you would accept a one-way ticket to Mars? See, it's not zero. It's not zero.
No, it's far from zero. No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how about a test flight? You willing a test flight to Milpitas, one way. Okay. Other questions for Mary? You really, you have to sort of stand up and check.
Yeah.
Point of curiosity from a fan. I've heard you, read you. I'm reading Spook now.
Yeah.
You obviously get into. You may have partly answered the question, but you obviously get into research deeply. You like to travel. You're fascinated with science. But just as a reader, what I wonder is it the writing that drives you most? What drives you to do this strange career?
It is it's almost the thrill of the chase. I think I start out, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do something about space exploration, the human side of it. And I know from all I really have in my head, okay, it's two things. One, a Discover story where I went to the neutral buoyancy tank, that huge swimming pool where they train astronauts for EVAs, extravehicular activities. And I'm just geeked out and deliriously happy at all the weird stuff and the unbelievable, crazy stuff that has to be done to train. You know, the number of times they rehearse every single move that's going to happen in space. Fascinating. The other thing is, years ago, talked to an astronaut, William Thornton, the guy, he studied osteoporosis, bone loss, which is a significant issue for astronauts. He's the one who let the cat out of the bag about the positional trainer, the camera, the toilet with the camera facing out. And at that point, I think I was like, one day, I will sit on that toilet with the camera. So it was kind of like, everything kind of starts to fall together, and I think, wow, this could be a book. I bet you could sort of cobble together some kind of weird book about all this, and then to go out and get those pieces and pull them all together and write the whole process is extraordinarily appealing and fun, although there's always a phase halfway through where I want to quit, and I'm crying and I'm telling my husband, why am I doing this? What was I thinking? This is such a nightmare. And then you pass through that and you go, okay, this will be fine. I love all of it, and the places it's a passport to these worlds that otherwise you don't get to visit, or that I wouldn't get to visit. I'm not an engineer. I don't have any background in space exploration or any of it, and I have this temporary pass, this hall pass, and I love that.
Do you start the writing before you finish the research?
I do. I start the writing as soon as I have a chapter's worth that I can write. Even though I don't know quite where it will fit in the book, I'll start writing. Yeah.
So I have a question over here. A lot of the subjects you're writing about, or the places you have to go to, are like traditionally men's worlds. And I'm wondering how being a woman doing this has, like, what effect you think it's had on what you've been able to get from people, as well as your approach.
Yeah. I have, particularly with the last book, with Packing from Mars, I've had a real sense of myself as an outsider of that world and that community. Not because I'm a woman, though, just because I don't work at NASA and I don't have a background. And so I'm very conscious about how people perceive me. You know, some nugget who knows nothing, who's got a BA in psychology, and she thinks she's writing a book, and who the hell is she? That's all going through my head. So that's so big, there's not really room for the, oh, and by the way, she's a woman. So it hasn't really been, that hasn't been so much of an issue, just because the other issue is larger. The fact that I don't have a science degree, I come in with a lot of questions and not a lot of knowledge, and so people are, God love them, they're very patient. The people that I interview are really almost more like unpaid tutors. I eat up a lot of their time, and I have a lot of gratitude for the patience and the time that they take to explain to me and to bring me up to speed. So that's really more, I think if anything's going to stand in my way, it's just like, well, I don't really have time for you, because you're going to get it wrong, and then I'm going to get in trouble with public affairs. So that kind of thing.
That I can believe.
During your research, is there been a time when you have found, I'm amazed at the access I've been given for any particular thing you're looking into?
When I've been amazed at the access, or the access I haven't gotten?
The access you have gotten.
I have gotten. Well, when I started packing for, all of them, Stiff was Stiff was difficult, because the people who do cadaver research back then anyway, before CSI and 6 Feet Under, were not very comfortable with the spotlight being shined on what they do, and didn't know what you're writing a funny book about the dead people, or what is this thing that you're doing? So I got a lot of people did not return my emails in that case. And then with sex labs, totally different situation for access. Researchers were very welcoming. We'd love to accommodate you, but seriously, there's going to be somebody in here, masturbating. They don't want you in the room, and you don't want to be in the room. So that's how they'd end up saying, well, why don't you be a subject, So, so the access there had so there's each book has these hurdles that when I go into it, I don't even think about it. Like, this will be great. I'll go here. I'll go here. I promise my editor the moon, like, oh, I'll be right there in the room, and then invariably reality sets in, and I see that there are reasons why, and with the space book, astronauts in particular, active astronauts are just besieged with media requests. They're not, you really don't want to burden them, and people who work for NASA are, there's a lot of rules and regulations, and they want, public affairs likes to be there, and access certain things make them a little uncomfortable. So I always am overly optimistic, and then reality sets in, and I have to find ways around it. So I'm not really sure if you were saying, am I ever surprised that I got the access I did? Every now and then, yeah, but usually I'm surprised that I'm not getting the access because I'm so naive when I start out.
Yeah, NASA is particularly onerous when it comes to having 6 people sitting there during the interview, taking notes. It's unclear what they're doing, but maybe it's good they're not in the sex business. Other questions for Mary? Yeah.
Just wondering which book was the toughest to research? Which book caused you the most difficulty?
I think Packing for Mars was the most difficult. There was a point, because I'm sort of known as the cadaver lady because of Stiff. At a certain point, I found out that the Constellation group at Johnson Space Center, they were going to do the moon base for a while there, and there was a capsule. They were doing an impact test when the capsule would splash down. They wanted to make sure that the astronaut suit, the hard pieces weren't going to, break bones or do anything. So they were doing essentially a crash test with a cadaver in a space suit, and I'm like, I'm there. I got to be there. But NASA's like, no, you're not. You're not there. You're not there at all. And I'd be like, well, okay, tell me what your concern is. Is it? Do you think I'm going to get it wrong? You can check the facts. You can read my quotes. Like, what can we do here to make this work? And they'd say, oh, it's headquarters. And then I'd say, well, who at headquarters? And they go, no, it's the Constellation people. And then the Constellation people would say, no, we're fine with you, Mary. And they go, oh, it's the Ohio State University people. They do not want you here. So I'd call Ohio State, and I go, so I understand you don't want me here. And it was this guy, John Bolt. He's like, what do you mean? I love Stiff. We want you to be here. It was just the public affairs people, like Death and NASA, we don't want the association, that's all. And so the guy at Ohio State just said, Mary, just show up. Just show up, and we'll deal with it. So I go there, and there's the cadaver being wired down there, and the guys from NASA are like, hey, nice to meet you. Who are you? And I tried to explain, and they just ran down, told the students, don't speak to her. Do not speak to her. They ran into an office. They got on the phone with this woman from Public Affairs, who'd been sort of my contact through it all. And, Mary Roach is here. Mary Roach is here. And this woman, God love her, she goes, Lynette Madison, she goes, Mary Roach is there. Oh, just talk to her. But I ran into situations like that. So that was, and what was frustrating is that I couldn't really understand. I'd say, here's my book. Look, I'm not doing an expose. I'm trying to do the same thing that you are. I'm trying to get people interested in space and space exploration. I want people to be fascinated, to have fun, to be entertained, and to want to read about it. Don't you want that too? So that one was trying. That one was particularly trying, but.
Well, lamentably, it's 1/2 the hour, and I believe, Adrian, somebody else comes in here, right? Yeah. Okay, so a big round of applause for Mary Roach.
I will be over, I'm going to sign books over, go back over there, so if anybody wants to stop by and say hi.
Did they have to be your books?
Anybody's book, any book you have, I will sign. Thank you.